Again, congratulations on the achievements that was shared amongst us. I'm going to go ahead and officially get started. And before I do that, though, Rebecca, do you have anything to say before I do that?
I don't. I just want to welcome everybody here tonight. I appreciate all the staff taking time to be here. We had our long council meeting last night, so I appreciate everybody showing back up tonight. And to the committee members, I appreciate your continued support and being here as we present what's going on with our budget. We'll turn things over briefly as soon as we've done all of the housekeeping items to Barbara to present to you tonight. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead on and officially begin our meeting. I would like to always open it with our current status right now, an effort to protect public health and prevent the spread of COVID-19 and to enable appropriate social distancing. The Measure S Citizens Oversight Committee meeting is not open for public attendance at this time. All meetings will be held via teleconference. To view the live meeting, you can go to our city's website, or you can go to Spectrum and Frontier. Customers may view the broadcast on Channel 3. To provide a public comment, email your written comments to mscocpubliccomments@sbcity.org by 4:00 p.m. the day of the scheduled meeting. Or you can call 909-384-5007 and leave a recorded comment not to exceed 3 minutes by 4:00 p.m. the day of the scheduled meeting. Notation: the subject line in your email should include the meeting date, Measure S Oversight Committee, and whether it is for public comment or for a specific agenda items. Written comments will be provided to the committee members prior to the meeting and will be posted online for public review, but will not be read aloud. Voicemail comments will be played aloud during the appropriate public comment portion of the meeting. Okay, with that being said, I'm going to go for roll call. And so I'll start with myself, Reverend Veronica, the chair, and representative of Ward 6. I'm going to go to our Ward 1.
Venus Williams, Ward 1, present.
Thank you. Ward 2.
Gloria Amaya, Ward 2.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome, Gloria.
Thank you.
We'll go down to, we have vacant is 3. Mike Gallo is absent, not here. Anthony Robinson is not here today, but we have Ward 7.
Ward 7 is here. Derek Wesson.
Yes, Derek Wesson, welcome again. Good. And we have Richard P. Avila, who is absent. And we have a mayor appointee.
Cliff Cummings here.
Okay, and that's Cliff Cummings, and that's the mayor appointee. Thank you very much. With that. Now, has there been any public comments for the items listed on the agenda? Has there any public comments came in?
There were no public comments.
There were no public comments and no recordings, right?
That's correct. Recordings either.
All right, so the review.
In the morning.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. The review and approval of minutes from May 17th, 2021's meeting. Did you review it? You know, I wanted to ask a question, Rebecca, if my recommendation on the California Theater for us to reinstate that commitment and where I have access, where there was access written in the minutes.
Mhm.
I really wanted sponsored workshops because they always have access to the children and the schools. So is this where I make a change or? Yeah.
Yes, you could request a modification, and then we can take accept a motion to approve with the requested modification to the minutes as presented.
Okay, I would like to have a modification on that, but for me to explain it to my fellow commissioners, I would like to ensure sponsored workshops for nonprofit organizations, the San Bernardino Unified School District, as I had said before, and to the bands, orchestra, maybe theater and dance workshops that can be sponsored by the California Theater, so that those kids have an opportunity to have workshops of development. So that.
So you wanted to clarify and add that language was what your intention was through discussion
correct.
last meeting. Okay.
That's correct.
All right.
They already have great access. They have kids come, but I would like them to have opportunities for them to be taught, for teaching to take place. So that's what I meant when, wanting to have some sponsored workshops.
Okay. So staff will modify that, assuming we have a motion and a second and approval of minutes with that edit.
And before I do then make that motion, I was going to say, we had on 2, that was Brother Anthony had made mention of that, but Miss Gloria, for Ward 2, when you were talking about bulk items being thrown in the street by some of our residents.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me okay? On the verbiage that's on our minute says cleanups, but we're really talking about, I'm going to put that back to Rebecca. We're talking about community dump days, right? So big, large, bulky items could be dumped.
So,
Because cleanup days is different than those dump days.
so dump days was referenced in there. I think it said cleanups. So we've got the dump days. You have free bulky item pickup for Burtech. Was there additional language? So you're talking about just general cleanups, correct?
Yeah. Well,
I was talking about larger dumping as far as couches, mattresses,
Illegal dumping.
illegal dumping.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
And we
Right.
could have stationed the big dumpsters in each ward, maybe a calendar, ward each week. Each ward has a different dump day or something like that.
Got you. So we can add that clarifying language in there as well.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. So that we can make sure that we're referencing those big, larger items, not weed picking, and sweeping
No,
streets.
no.
We're talking about the bulks. Okay.
We'll make sure that we add that to that language.
Okay.
Okay.
And just another clarification I know our commissioner in Ward 5 presented it, the diversity and inclusion manager.
Mhm.
Is that just to manage, or are they supposed to have a position of making sure that there is diversity in hiring them? What is that, hiring a diversity and inclusion manager?
I think that was the intent, that it would be the broad scope to manage that and to ensure that all of our practices provide for and make sure that we are hiring a diverse workforce. But certainly if you would like to add some clarifying language.
Yeah, I'd like to add some clarifying language regarding what would be the rubric of that? What would be the, making sure that that takes place? How is that diversity identified? I mean, and
Maybe
projected?
just adding in some language about implementation.
Yes.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay. All right, so that was basically what I had to add. I would like to make a motion to make an amendment to those minutes with that clarifying language. Can I have someone accept?
Ward number 1, Venus Williams, I accept the clarifying language.
Okay, can it be seconded?
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, good. So those are the acceptance of the amendment, of the wording to the amendments. And so now, are there anything else with those minutes? Is that I just did the amending the minutes. Now I have to accept the minutes as it is, right? Or that was fine.
If assuming that the motioner, seconder, and the committee members don't have an objection, I think we can take that as an approval with the amendments.
Okay.
Were there any objections to that being a combined action?
Do we have any objections with that being a combined action?
No, Ward number 1, no.
Okay. Okay. All right. Great. Excellent. So it's been accepted. So with that being said, turn it to my staff so we can give us the report. Ms. Barbara.
Good evening, commission members. As you all know, we met with council last night to do kind of a second pass at the budget where we brought back to them the costing of the items that they gave us on the 13th as kind of their additions to the budget that we presented. And then we gave them sort of alternatives to the things that they brought to us. And then they made some decisions last night. So we wanted to present that to you so that you could give us maybe some formal recommendations that you would like to have us take back to them on the 16th before they take their next steps. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with a PowerPoint. I've tried to condense what we did last night because you do not want me to go through everything that I went through with them. Hopefully you just want to see, you know, the key
point. As you pull that up,
who's the host for the meeting? They've disabled screen sharing. So I'm hoping whoever the host is can enable that.
I think, Sam, are you the host?
It should be, I think Shelby's giving you the thumbs up. So you should be good now.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey,
Ms. Barbara, while you're doing that, I wanted to ask Cliff, you said you had to leave at 6, Cliff?
I do.
Okay, do you have any recommendations or anything that you want us to put down? Because any recommendations, we have to do it formally to be submitted.
No, I'm cool.
You're good?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
And Chairperson, just before we get started, I am going to make a few more calls to some of your other committee members because once Mr. Cummings leaves, we won't have a quorum to staff can prepare present the information, but you won't be able to take a motion and conclude the meeting. So.
And Gallo has not responded to me. I texted him.
Okay.
We'll let Barbara get started so at least you can hear as much information as possible.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so tonight, budget calendar, we'll go over the meeting review and then formal recommendation from you. We all know the budget calendar. I'm not going to go into that a whole lot because we have limited time. The council meeting, the first thing we talked about was your feedback from the previous meetings so that they would have that to sort of start with. And then our updated revenue forecast, which, as you may have heard, we had some news that our sales and use tax was going to be significantly less than we had previously thought. So, pardon me, while that's not really terrible news, it's a little frustrating, but sales tax is one of those incredibly volatile things. And as a city that relies heavily on sales tax, we kind of have to anticipate that these things are going to happen, which is part of why, though we had originally anticipated 186 million in revenue, our initial proposal for the budget was 152 million, because sales tax always goes up and down. You have booms and busts in different sectors of sales tax. So you never want to be spending up to every last penny that you forecast, because sales tax is just not that reliable.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
My understanding is the same guy who made the $12 million mistake in the past was the same consultant who made this mistake? Because if I do the math, that would be about $1.2 billion in sales that we would have had to increase. About 1% coming to the city. Is that right?
I don't believe it's exactly the same person.
Exactly the same firm?
Same firm, yes.
Okay, are they still with us?
As of today, yes.
As of today, oh, well, let's go for tomorrow. Comment, I hope, well taken.
Okay, so moving into what the council requested as additions on the 13th, and we costed those out as we did, in the last couple of weeks. In community and economic development, as y'all are aware, code enforcement has been an issue. So they recommended 9 additional positions for a cost of about 1.5 million. In the police department, they recommended 20 patrol officers, 4 community service officers, 2 criminal investigation officers, 1 forensic technician, 4 sergeants, 2 lieutenants, vehicles, all that for about 7.8 million. Human resources, the diversity, please excuse my misspelling there, and inclusion manager. And that we establish a liability reserve, which is a really good idea. We have a deductible on our major liability insurance of $5 million. So having a reserve fund for that actually has that $5 million should we ever have to meet that deductible wouldn't be a bad thing. How we establish that is sort of the question there. In the city manager's office, they recommended hiring an additional assistant city manager so that it wouldn't just be Rebecca. That is fairly typical of cities our size. Most cities our size and bigger have at least 2, sometimes 3 or more. In general government, they recommended additional funding for the community intervention program, also called the violence intervention program. And annual support for the California Theater San Bernardino Symphony. I think that $75,000 is actually for the San Bernardino Symphony. They perform at the California Theater. That's what I understand from what council has said now. Parks and Recreation, they recommended hiring 2 pool maintenance coordinators. And that was in order to take the cleaning of the pools out of the responsibility of the lifeguards. In Public Works, they wanted to add some additional equipment funding because Public Works has not had their equipment replaced in years. They do have some extremely old equipment. And then adding security at all of city parks. Some of the city parks have security now, and staff was recommending adding fencing at quite a few parks, but this is adding actual security at all of the parks. And last but not least, they also added various streets and sidewalks to the capital improvement program for about 3.6 million for a total operating budget of about 165 million. And then the CIP allocated to Measure S would increase to about 25 million. So after we cost that out, Finance's next move, of course, is to look at what does that do to fund balance? What does that do basically to the health of our city? We want to keep, of course, emergency reserves of 15%. That's our critical reserve. And then our economic contingency reserve. What if sales tax goes up and down? Is that 10% of the adopted budget? if we were to add all of those city council requested additions, we would have to dip into those contingency reserves, and we would draw down those reserves to only 4% at the end of this year, assuming that all of our other revenues, including Measure S and all of the others, came in at our forecasts, which that always makes me just a little nervous to be that tight in estimates. But that is where we would end up, is at about 19% reserves at the end of fiscal year 21-22. So staff, in response to these, said, okay, let's look at what council is asking for and why they're asking for these things, as opposed to just saying we can't afford that. Staff wanted to come back with alternatives that said, okay, we understand what you're asking for and why you're asking for them, and here's what we think. Each department said, okay, here's what we think would meet those needs and not be as expensive. So in community and economic development, they added council added 9 positions, because what they were thinking was, we need to have all of these new code enforcement people and these additional people to deal with street vending on nights and weekends, and we just don't have enough people, even though we added more at the mid-year, and it's just not working. Well, what staff is aware of that, isn't as obvious to council, is that we're just now hiring those people, because it takes at least 60 days to hire somebody, and then to train them and get them on the street as a code enforcement officer, of course, takes longer. So programs that were approved at mid-year in March are only now ramping up. So we know we've got 3 new code enforcement officers that are just coming on board, and we added 3 more in the proposed budget. So we feel like 1 more code enforcement officer would help with that. We also added in the budget 2 additional business registration inspectors, who are specifically the people who deal with the sidewalk vending. There were already 4, and we added 2 specifically for nights and weekends. And then we thought, okay, then lastly, if we add another $100,000 in part-time and overtime funds, that will give us that little extra for nights and weekends for code enforcement that can kind of help reinforce those business registration inspectors. So that was kind of staff's response to, okay, we don't think we need quite that much staff, because we need to take the staff that we've already gotten permission to hire and get them on the street before we really make the determination that we need a whole bunch more. So that was staff's kind of counter there. The police department, when they looked at everything, they said, what we really need are these civilian support staff people, because those civilian support staff are the ones that over the years we have cut when we really didn't have money to balance the budget. We want to keep the sworn officers in place because we need them. But when we did that as a city, those sworn officers then have to do all of this paperwork, and they have to do all these jobs that normally non-sworn civilians do. So then, rather than spending their time patrolling and responding to calls, they'll respond to a call, and then they have to do all the paperwork behind it. And they have to wait for all of the other people to do their stuff, because there are very few of them. So if we hire these 7 support positions, then we have 7 existing sworn patrol officers that are immediately back on the street. So that was what we thought, okay, well, that's a great way to immediately get 7 patrol officers out on the street. And we're putting those support people back in place to really shore up the police department. And then the other thing that the police department said was, you really didn't give us enough money for our vehicles. And this was my bad, because I want to bring this comprehensive fleet replacement plan, with Public Works, so that we're really replacing everything on a schedule and not having these really old vehicles and old equipment. But these commercial traffic unit vehicles take 8 to 12 months when you order them to come in. And if I bring a fleet replacement plan to council in November, we're not going to get them in time for this unit to be ready to go in July of next year necessarily. So we added $500,000 to make sure we could get those vehicles. Then in human resources, staff absolutely supports the diversity and inclusion manager, because that's that's just something that will help the city all around, because diversity is something that improves us all. And then in human resources, while we support the liability reserve, we think that we need to consider where the seed funding source is, where's that going to come from, and long-term funding, and then return to council at the Q1 report with a plan for how we can build that up over time. In the city manager's office, staff is, yes, we need another assistant city manager. We all see how hard Rebecca works. In general government, the additional funding for the community intervention program of $150,000. And then
Can I interrupt? This is Mike Gallo. Can you tell me what the diversity officer duties and responsibilities would be? Just maybe articulate a few of them.
I'm going to let Eddie Eveland handle that one. She's our HR director. And last time I tried, I kind of babbled. She's way better.
Well, certainly. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for the question, Commissioner. So to name a few, I would suggest that person, that classification, develop and maintain an organizational diversity, inclusion, and equity strategic plan. Also develop and implement outreach programs, lead discussions across the organization on complex and sensitive topics. Additionally, I would also like to enhance the onboarding process and employee engagement activities from a diversity perspective. Develop and deliver education and training programs. I do believe that had come up in the prior meeting. Establish metrics and conduct periodic reviews and to measure the strategic plan and to see our progress. Identify creative approaches to outreach and engage through diversity and the inclusion lens internally within the organization and externally through outreach. Identify potential conditions in the organization that might need special attention and mitigation, and collaboration with those community-based organizations, schools, colleges, universities. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, at some point I'd be really interested in the metrics. Is it, how many various colored, and population do we have as incorporated in the police department? What does it really, what does it really mean? How are you going to measure the effectiveness of something? I have no doubt we can keep someone busy doing all of those tasks, but it would just be nice to know what our real objectives are, to maintain a diverse workforce and have it reflect our community. And those are all good things that, to see if, for instance, we can maintain, some Hispanic, Spanish-speaking folks to, be out in the community and be on the street. Would this apply to, on the street police officers or management or both? Or, it's just be kind of nice to know what the metrics are for this, so we can know whether or not this person is effective.
Most definitely, and that would be the top priority, right, to develop the strategic plan and develop those metrics and run that analysis and assess the organization internally, externally, and develop that strategic plan. So that would be first and foremost. You need to know where you're at to know where you're going and what your targets are.
So would we be hiring this individual before we have a strategic plan or after?
Before. We would be hiring that individual before.
So, okay.
This person would be tasked with developing and implementing.
I see. Got it. A strategic plan and metrics.
Correct.
Yep. Got it. Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I think next, staff had decided that we would recommend deferring annual support for the San Bernardino Symphony and the California Theater, because right now we're recommending that facility be completely rehabilitated. So we thought we would defer the support for that. And then Parks and Recreation, we didn't recommend hiring maintenance coordinators. We thought that cleaning the pools could stay with the lifeguards. And then in Public Works, we felt the additional equipment funding, we recommended that, and security at the city parks. And then we actually did not recommend, I'm sorry, I should have taken that out. We did not recommend the capital improvements. We felt that recommending we actually have about 25 million in streets that we're recommending and 22 million in various CIP coming from Measure S, and that adding another 3.6 to what is already the largest CIP program that the city has undertaken in many, many years is a lot. And we're going to come back to council at the first quarter report with, more CIP and then a 5-year, long range CIP, really trying to get into an ongoing, progressive capital plan rather than a sort of annual one-off. So we felt like this was just a lot already. So
could I ask about the park security?
Yes.
Will they be addressing the homeless issue as it relates to that? And what authority would they have to, have some intervention in that regard?
I'm not really sure. Chris, can you speak to that? I know you're over that contract.
Sure. Good evening, Commissioners. So the park security that we're talking about is really nighttime security to go in, clear out the park and lock any gates. And really just right now, we have challenges with clearing people out of the parks, whether it be homeless or we have people who are using the parks late. So really the function of this is for security and is to get everyone out of the park and then make sure that those parking lots are closed up at the end of the night as well. So in terms of the homelessness piece, I think it's kind of a combination of maybe security and in some cases the police department. But really the terms of our services that we're asking for from our security contractor is for them to go in, clear the park out, close the park down. So.
And let me weigh in on this just for a second, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Gallo. Good evening. One of the intentions here is we're also in the process of securing our parks better. So to that end, for example, we just added to our community development block grant program fencing for Second Lake Park. It's hard to secure a park that doesn't have a fence around it. So we're in the process of doing that type of work as well.
Right.
That's great. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I believe we recommended fencing actually for 3 different parks facilities in the proposed budget. And Second Lake was obviously the biggest. Yeah.
Also Pioneer Cemetery. So yeah.
Pioneer Cemetery and sorry, I can't remember the other one. Maybe Chris can or Jim can, and if they can, interrupt me.
The third site was it was around the ceramic studio at Parasail Park. Yeah,
there's one more too though, but it'll come to me anyway. But fund balance. So one of the things
it was Hernandez Community Center.
Yes, thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
I knew. Yeah, I knew somebody would remember it. Hernandez Community Center. Yay. So then fund balance is, it's one of the things that I worry about the most is, how are we looking for fund balance? Because that's really what the city is going to look at if we're ever really faced with another economic crisis is, where's our fund balance? So if the additional staff recommendation, if we went with that as opposed to the city council requested additions, and this isn't to say one is good, one is bad. That isn't, they made recommendations. We said, hey, here are some other ones to consider. And that's all this is. That is not saying some are good, some are bad. These are just alternatives. So staff tried to keep ours within a number that would keep us at our 15% emergency reserves, our 10% economic contingency reserves, and then there remains some Measure S unallocated funds within our alternate options, which got us at a projected ending general fund reserve of 28%. So makes me a little happier just because I'm, kind of conservative, fiscally conservative finance person. So after, we went through all of this with council, they, talked around a lot of the different things that they looked at, and eventually they came back to, okay, they all liked the May 13th budget as it was, but they wanted some other things. So they said, let's start with the May 13 budget and let's make some key changes there and add a couple of things and adopt that, and then come back to it late, and then come back to this later and argue the rest. So what they ended up agreeing to then was an adoption of the proposed budget as staff presented it on May 13th with the following reductions and additions. So they made some reductions in the mayor's budget of about $40,000 and limiting the amount that would be available for the State of the City address. Then they reduced the city council postage budget, sorry, that was hard for me to say, by about $4,100. And they increased in the things of the little things that they had asked for. They added 3 parking enforcement officers instead of 4. They had originally said 4. And then they decided that the capital improvement projects were extremely important to them. So they added in the 3 parking enforcement officials and the capital improvement projects. And that is where they landed at the end of the night last night. And they said, okay, that's where we are. And that's what we're going to adopt. And we will come back on the 16th and talk about the rest. So that is their deal. And this should say the 16th, not the 6th. And I apologize for that. I normally am better at proofreading my stuff, and I apologize. But we will have
any summary of the capital improvement projects you guys are thinking of doing, just at top level?
Yes, actually, I have extra slides at the end in case you all had any questions like that, and I can bring those up.
No, that'd be great. Just kind of know what the priorities are.
Yeah, absolutely. I can bring them up. I didn't want to get into like just wild detail with you all, but I wanted to make sure I had it in case you asked. Yeah, so we have the budget public hearing. Yeah. And then budget adoption, essentially the ratification of their decision last night, because we haven't had the hearing, so they couldn't legally adopt the budget. But what they did was they said, this is what we're going to adopt. And then they will have the opportunity to revisit additional items for inclusion. So that's essentially what went on and what will go on in 2 weeks. So then the opportunity for you all is to discuss, what do you like about their ideas? What don't you like? What would you like to see them do? And then you have the opportunity to make formal recommendations to them to say, Measure S would really like to see you do blah, 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 And with that, I will go find the capital projects and we can, maybe I don't have it on this one. Sorry, I will have Sam email it to you because I don't have email right now. But Sam can PDF this 2 pages.
While we're waiting for Sam to do the email to bring it up, I have a question. What is the percentage that we have base that goes to our police department from our Measure S is it 0.25 or what was the base number?
Of Measure S that comes in, because Measure Z, the equivalent was 0.25. Right. That's the amount that of Measure S that is being transferred to the general.
Right. So out of that 0.25, because that's what we have as a standard. When we talk about extra, that's not included in that 0.25. This is an additional that you're bringing those additional costs or proposal to us on top of the 0.25.
No, those are extra funds that we're not recommending be spent at this time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that 5.6 million are funds that staff is saying we think those should be reserved. Now, this committee could say we think those should be spent for this. that is totally within your purview to make a recommendation for those.
I guess so the non-sworn civilians that are be helping, am I understanding that that's a request to come from Measure S funding?
We haven't made specific requests for what funding will fund a particular position. We have just said this would be the most effective use of funds for the police department, because by spending $887,000, we can get 7 officers on the street, and 7 officers costs a lot more than that. If
Okay.
Barbara,
I just wanted to make sure that I understood you correctly as far as the funding for Measure S funds. Okay, Sam, do you have those?
It might be easier. I don't know. Would you just want me to share? It's just the 2 slides from last night, correct, Barbara?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be easier. I could just share my screen real briefly.
Okay.
Certainly, we can email it out afterwards, but then just in the, instead of going back and forth via email and all that.
That's fine.
So Barbara, you have to make Sam the host.
Oh, I have to make him the host? How do I do that?
Can she just allow to share screen under security?
Yeah.
Yep, you should be able to now.
And Barbara, just to clarify, the items that you're bringing up now are the additional 3.5 or $3.6 million that's proposed over and above what was already included in the proposed budget from May 13th, correct?
Yes.
So there are quite a few additional CIP projects that are on the list already for inclusion. So these are the additional items.
Can everybody see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
We can.
And I think, if I can interrupt just for a second, I think when we send this information out by email, we should send the entire list, this list plus the list from May 13th. So there's a complete, so everybody on the committee has a complete picture of what is being recommended for the CIP. Thanks.
It looks like committee member Gloria Maya had her hand up.
I don't see hands going up from this screen. I guess because we're sharing information slide. So I don't see it. So thank you. Gloria, you can go. I recognize you. You can speak.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. I was looking at the intervention budget, the $150,000. Is that going to the police department or to the local VIP program on top of their allotted granted budget?
It would. Oh, go ahead.
It would be going to the outreach workers, not the police department. So this is in addition to what we have supported through the VIP grant dollars that we receive.
To answer your question, is the VIP, Gloria.
Thank you.
Okay. Was it Barbara? Are you going to be going over this slide with us? Or
do you want us to go over the individual items or?
Yes, just go through it. Yes, just go through it briefly.
Okay. Well, the additions that would be funded with Measure S are a complete reconstruction of Congress Street, Virginia Street from E Street to F Street, and from G Street to H Street. Hillside and Fairfax repaving and fencing, that we don't have pricing for the fencing yet. That's just for the repaving. 16th Street from Waterman to Sepulveda. It's only the extension from extension of that project by 2 blocks. I believe we're extending it from Sepulveda to Sierra, if that's right, Alex. Niles from San Gabriel to Crestview. And then Trenton from Crestview to Valencia, and Valencia from Trenton to Niles. Cedar Street from Highland to 29th, complete reconstruction. Arden Street by the soccer fields, and Country Club Lane from Waterman to Fremontia, complete reconstruction. You want to go to the next page? Oh, there we go. Okay, also Arden Street from Highland south to Highland Creek, which is the end of that street, just north of Baseline. Let's see, Acacia from 10th Street to Baseline. That's actually being substituted. We had a duplicate project in the budgeted CIP, so there's no additional cost to that one. And the others are already either underway or not something that can be started right away, or not something the city can do because it's not in our jurisdiction.
And all of these projects would be funded using Measure S dollars, as are the majority of the other capital improvement projects that are not Measure I or SD1 funds, correct, Barbara?
Yes.
And so we are, and how, can you remind me please on how much funding was in our I fund for the streets?
I will have to look in my budget book. That might take me just a second.
Because that was allocated just for street improvement, am I correct?
Yes.
And do we know how, with this improvement right here, how many of these streets are spread out through each ward, or is this, are we top heavy? We spread out, we equal? How does that work? How did you select these streets?
These streets were council member submitted streets.
Okay.
So there's no pavement improvement plan that you would prioritize, streets based on traffic usage, condition, because as you don't maintain these things, it becomes more and more expensive to fix them if you don't get it into some kind of a game plan.
There
Right.
absolutely is, and the streets that are submitted in the proposed budget, and we'll send you that list of all of that CIP. All of those came from our pavement management system and were vetted through our city engineer, and we went through a whole data-driven process to select those.
So this kind of usurps that process. That's what I think I'm hearing.
No, it doesn't. So we had two different pieces. We had what staff proposed on the May 13th budget, which we went through that. And then when that information was presented to the council, they had a number of additional items that they wanted to have considered. These are those additional items.
Yeah, but my point is these are not part of your pavement improvement plan, or were they?
Yes, yeah.
They're certainly all projects that we have on the list, but they were not the groupings that we had recommended for first priority.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, at least they're on your list, right? We're not making you fix streets that you don't think need to be fixed. Okay, that's a good thing.
We should also note that, Mike, that we're bringing back a supplemental recommendation shortly to go to a 5-year CIP. So some of this stuff is planned out further in advance, and as part of that, I think we're going to be including. We've had a request from Councilmember Sanchez, the May 19th meeting, to start to develop a complete data-driven system for making these types of decisions. So that is going to be brought forward at a future, at a very in the very near future to a city council meeting.
That'll be cool. Well, it makes your job easier when you got a kind of game plan to move forward with. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Love it.
Ward number 1 through the chair. Sam, are you talking about sending this list out that we're looking at to us? Because I'm looking at it in my hand. It was already sent. It's on page 12 and 13 with all the information that we're looking at on the screen.
Yeah, I think it was sent out previously with the 513 budget, but we can, just to summarize, again, we can be happy to send out the CIP from 513 as well as this additional CIP.
Okay.
And you had asked about Measure I. It looks like about 6.7 million. That's not exact, but I think it's about right.
6.7 million. And they had streets already allocated to be improved with that funding?
Yes, ma'am.
And none of those streets are listed here?
No, those streets are already in the proposed budget from May 13th.
Okay.
And I think we should point out too that in terms of the total investment through the CIP, I think it's in the range of $27 million now, right, Barbara?
For streets, yes.
For streets, which, we've been doing dribs and drabs over time, $3 or $4 million worth a year. Now we're going to be able to hit it much harder. I mean, the total deferred maintenance on streets alone in the city is over $200 million.
Wow.
But nonetheless, we are really starting to make a much more meaningful impact through this investment. So we're not, it's doubtful we'll ever completely catch up, but we're making major strides. This year is a huge year for us through the CIP, especially on streets.
That's great.
Okay.
Sam, you can probably stop sharing.
Good. I just again, I know that they have these streets, and that was recommended definitely by council. I just want to make sure, at least bring to the attention that these street improvements are spread out through our community so that all of our residents can be able to enjoy the improvements of what is taking place.
Do you want to have a motion to have that be included as part of a recommendation?
I want that to be part of the formal submission. I definitely would like these street improvements to be spread out throughout our wards so that all of our residents can be able to, especially if all of them are on street improvement anyway, on your street improvement list anyway.
Yeah, and that would be the qualifier that I'd make on it, as long as it's on the street improvement plan. I mean, you don't want to just artificially develop an improvement plan that our professionals aren't planning.
Right, but I definitely don't want to usurp something that was planned and then it doesn't get. I just want to make sure that all wards are covered through this process. That's what my recommendation on that.
All right. Does somebody want to make a motion and second that so that we can make sure that that's part of your formal recommendation?
I make a motion.
I mean, I'll second it with the provision that it be part of the street improvement plan, that we're not taking a last priority item and moving it up just because of award distribution.
All right, very good.
It's been moved to second. Is all approved?
Aye.
Aye. Was I saying aye? Any opposed? Okay, then ayes carry it. Good.
All right, we will take that formal recommendation to council on the 16th.
Yes, that is one. According to the things that came through too with our street projects, building, parks, facility, lighting, we also received in our package the economic development, public works engineering package. What was that package? Economic development for the project manager. Those packages. Was that recommended for funds for Measure S to cover?
No, ma'am.
No? Oh, okay. All right. For our city manager, that was a recommendation for our Measure S funds to cover?
Ma'am, we didn't make specific recommendations on the source of funding.
But
So-
the council recommend that to come out from a,
No, they did not.
So are you going to make those allocations on specific funding types eventually? Where Measure S dollars will.
yeah, that was my question, is to make sure that, I wanted to make sure that we understood what council had, what their recommendation was, and my understanding was that what they were recommending was brought to us so that we could review it and make suggestions towards it.
And my, I guess the way I feel my duty would be is to make sure that we actually have some measure of accountability of outcomes on the budget expenditures that we're making committee recommendations for. So that would be my specific interest in knowing that, is so that we could report during whatever future reporting period we might decide to give to the public, that these funds were spent on this, and these are the outcomes that we achieved through those. So that's why I was asking about metrics, et cetera, because that's really what somebody's going to want to hear, not that you spent the money. They'll want to know what were the outcomes of the expenditure of money, not just that we now have 5 more people or whatever. It's what did we actually achieve with those 5 people, and was there metrics established in the strategic plan that we're putting together and things like that. So that would be my interest.
So we can certainly include that as a motion before we close. Mr. Gallo, thank you. I think that's a good idea. Barbara, maybe we want to just recap, because what we presented on May 13th had clear guidelines in terms of what we were going to spend Measure S dollars on. Then the additional amount for the capital improvement projects that are recommended by council, those will all be attributed to Measure S. And I don't know if there's any other funding items that have been identified that would draw on specifically Measure S revenue, but we will make, you do need to receive that information, and we will make note of that. So I don't think that any additional Measure S revenue was recommended for expenditure in this fiscal year's budget, other than what had been presented on May 13th, which we provided a summary of, and then the additional $3.6 million in capital projects. Is that right, Barbara? Was there anything else that would?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been endeavoring to maintain the previous direction to allocate the 25%, essentially the old Measure Z money, to administrative costs, personnel costs, and then the balance making available for one-time expenditures, really for CIP purposes. So I think we're pretty close to that, maybe on that. That was certainly what was in the proposed budget that was presented on May 13th, and really with most of the additions that were read in or are pending, that's going to continue. Most of the expenditures, additional expenditures over and above that May 13th proposed budget, are in CIP, which means they're basically one-time expenditures also.
Well, I would think you guys for the whole budget would want to know what the metrics are for evaluating effectiveness of allocation of budget to a specific item. I'm sure that's what you guys think about.
Yes, we absolutely are. That's one of our focuses for this year.
And I know you had recommended, Rebecca, that we do Measure S as one-time capital improvement. You would recommend a one-time capital improvement for Measure S funding more as the model, because that's more sustainable, at least that you had stated, than an ongoing, instead of individuals' salary and all of that. We were doing Measure S as city improvement projects. That was my understanding.
Yes, that other than the 25% that we were dedicating.
Exactly, other than, Barbara, yes, because that was standard to be left alone. But
because especially
in addition to, I must say, intervention programming as we see it as VIP. Matter of fact, Ms. Gloria, you had your I see that you wanted to make a comment regarding So critical
Yeah.
response.
Yeah, to the intervention program, we know that it's here in our city, but my question was, is it based, the real-time analysis and critical response, is it connected to the VIP grants or programs? Meaning, when there's an actual critical call, what's their response time and how effective are they within the city of eliminating, most of the violence? Or is it, because I've heard that it was a week later they get the phone call. So it's not, from my recollection, it's not a real-time analysis or critical response.
Do we have the chief online or David?
We do not have David with us. Committee member Maya, I will have David Miranda follow up with you and spend some more time talking about the program and how it's operating at present. It primarily is being funded through grant funding. They have been achieving the metrics as required under the grant in terms of outreach, connecting people that are at risk for being involved in violent activity to services and trying to provide those outreach services to them. Their primary focus isn't always immediate response, but to provide that follow-up and supportive services later. So we'll have David Miranda spend a little bit of time with you and would be happy to answer any specific questions you have after he goes through exactly what's going on with the program and what their plans are moving forward.
Oh, thank you. I just feel it's imperative to the additional funding that they're receiving that, I'll talk to David about it, but the real-time analysis will actually be helpful during, with that funding as well.
All right. Thank you.
We can put that as a recommended request to have that real-time analysis and critical response. That would, we want to make that a formal recommendation that we add that to our VIP process.
Okay, do we want to take a combined motion on that and Committee Member Gallo's request in terms of making sure that we have outcomes reporting?
Yes.
Expenditures?
Outcomes reporting on expenditures and making sure that about the listing on the streets. You're speaking of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, all of the expenditures through Measure S and elsewhere
Right.
that you have outcomes data. I think those are related. So I think it would be good to combine them as a motion.
Since a portion of funding is Measure S, we can't drive the whole thing, but that would be something I'm sure our committee would love to report to our community, at the end of this, that we spent it on a certain thing and we achieved these goals and objectives and specific outcomes. Yeah.
Okay. So the
maybe
motion
outcomes and objectives regarding our projects, in addition to our real-time analysis and critical response with our VIP. I would like to make a motion that we add those to our formal recommendation to council. May I have someone make a motion to accept?
Sure, I can either move or second if you were making the motion. Yeah.
I'm making a motion. It's been moved and seconded to accept those recommendations to council. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Good. We have those two that is added. Again, with the Measure S funding, we're supposed to be doing some intervention programs as well, maybe some activities that funding can go to. I know for Parks and Rec, for programs, from some of that funding can go to programming for Parks and Rec.
Would you like to make that a motion to make a recommendation that additional funding be dedicated for that purpose.
Do we have programming? Am I overlooking? I just want to make sure, because I definitely want our capital improvement, but I also want community programs and activities also that hits our intervention process for our youth in the city. Do we have that listed in here, or?
So we do have programming. It's not all necessarily tied specifically to Measure S funding, but we do have quite a bit of programming that was included in the overall budget between the Parks and Recreation programming, and then of course formally through the Violence Intervention Program and Youth Intervention Program that is under David Miranda.
Okay. The Violence and Prevention Program, that's not taking care of basketball, swimming, and stuff like that. That's what I'm referring to, dance or things, whatever the youth would like to participate, technology, learning, or whatnot, that type of programming that will be added to our Parks and Rec ability for our youth to be able to utilize. So definitely I'd like to add that as a part of our recommendation is our Parks and Recreation programming, added funds. So
you'd like to recommend additional funds over and above what we included in the budget. Maybe Jim Tickmeyer can talk a little bit about what we are already including in the budget. I believe we've got some increases that were added this year to provide for some additional programming, including part-time support staff.
Okay, good.
And so forth.
Okay, all right, that's support staff. Jim, I'm so glad you're here for Parks and Rec. So do we have like in history, we had a wonderful basketball, football could be done, tennis, teaching tennis and all these activities. What activities do we have that we can say that our youth is going to be participating in with our programming?
Thank you, committee member Veronica Martindale Taylor. We actually have we've requested and tentatively have been approved for quite a substantial expansion in our part-time staff budget, as well as our materials and supplies, everything that supports those types of programs. We have those programs currently available for our youth. We have youth soccer, youth t-ball, basketball. What we did about 3 years ago was relaunch those programs. Those programs were non-existent for a period of time. What we've done is reintroduce those programs for our youngest participants and are starting to expand into the upper age groups as the youth that engaged in those programs initially at the very young ages start to progress up in the age groups. That's how we're expanding our programs. During the time that those programs were not available, we really lost contact and participation with a particular age group because they found those services in surrounding cities. So as we re-implemented those programs, we started with the younger ages and now are expanding up into, I believe we're up to the 12-year-old age group. We have adult programming, open gym that we're implementing now. But in our proposed budget that we took to council and they reviewed last night, there is a significant increase in funding for our Parks and Recreation, mainly our recreation division that would serve that youth sports population.
Okay, I was just making sure that, and I'm glad that you received funding, but I wanted to make sure that it was funding us for staff, but making sure that programming was paid and can be covered. And the kids don't have to pay. Or do the kids still have to pay in order to participate?
For our youth sports programs, there is a participation fee. It's very minimal and it's reduced for city residents. We do have some level of free open gym programming and those types of things, but it is a fee-based program for our youth sports.
And what sports do you have on docket already now, currently?
Right now we've got t-ball, softball, and baseball. We've got basketball, and we also have soccer.
And what is that payment, that minimum payment that you're referring to that they have to pay?
I believe the entry fee for those is $25 for the entire season.
Is that including uniforms and everything?
Yeah, it includes I wouldn't say a uniform, but it's more recreational level, t-shirt, socks, for t-ball, it's a hat, those types of things. But it does include the basic uniform.
The $25 includes the basic.
Yes. The registration fee really, it falls short of even covering what the cost per child is. So there's
What would you say the cost per child is?
I would say cost per child with staff,
with the uniform and everything.
Uniform staff. We're spending the majority of the registration fee collected on items that are distributed to the participants. The t-shirts, hats, staff is basically covered by the city's budget.
Okay, so then in order to cover it, what would you say would be for the kids in order for it to be covered? So it's not
to turn it into a free event or free program.
And some can be sponsored. Doesn't have to be. The residents is paying for it. Residents, and the tax dollars are paying for it. I'm just saying if we could have some kids that can be noted as sponsored through the programming.
We do have a program that is scholarship based, so we do reach out to sponsors to help cover some of those kids that have a documented fiscal challenge.
Excellent. So you just proved my point. I don't want staff to have to be, even though you can still reach out for sponsorship, but we have funding. So I would like to allocate some funding for programming for sponsorship for youth. I'm making a motion to make a sponsorship for youth to be able to participate in the sports activities. So cover their cost. So some of the Measure S funds go to that. So may I have somebody make a motion to accept that?
So to clarify, a youth sports, say scholarship or sponsorship program funded by the city?
That's correct.
Well, I'd need to know how much. I'd need to know how much money that is.
We can talk about that right now, and how many kids. I mean, in each there's different. We have different parks and recreation. I guess our parks and recreation leader can let us know what's the active amount.
I wouldn't have an accurate estimate to give you of how many kids would qualify.
Right now, what's the standing number right now? What's the
number of
your participants that are sponsored by businesses that are helping us to be sponsored?
I don't have that information available on hand right now.
Okay.
Do we know the number of youth that are participating in the program right now? Or approximate, like not sponsored by anyone, but just
the total number of participants?
Yeah, or a round figure
for all of the sports across the board on an annual basis.
Yeah, because it sounds like you multiply that number times $25, and you just characterize what the total.
I think in that neighborhood.
Well, I mean that's a pretty rough estimate. But.
Yeah. Let's see.
I could have that number for you in a couple of minutes. I would need to dig it up through my files.
Okay.
Now, in addition to that motion, Veronica, like if we're talking about sponsorship of the kids that might have the physical need, I don't know as far as coaches or support personnel, individuals that are participating in the sports, are they getting a stipend, or is it just a pure voluntary basis?
What we typically do is fill the teams and then reach out to parents and guardians to be volunteer coaches. In the end, we normally have 1 or 2 teams that don't have a volunteer coach, so we assign our Parks and Rec staff to that, our part-time staff members. Our goal is to get volunteers to coach all of the sports, but we don't typically have that level of involvement from the parents and community members.
Well, that's what I paid attention throughout the years. And that's what I would like, and I would propose to our commission that we steer away from. For us to have the funding and we can hire individuals to be more responsive, be on time, and not to have a volunteer. Not to say that they can't volunteer, but we want these programs for our youth to participate, so we should have professional staffing that can be able to teach our children and these activities. And these volunteers can be in addition to, but let's not search and hunt for people to teach our kids when we don't have to.
Typical recreation model is as we're doing with volunteer coaching for those types of programs. It's not typical for a recreation level program, and I'm not saying that it can't happen or that it's not a feasible and reasonable idea, but the more typical model for youth recreation sports is to have a substantial amount of volunteer coaching.
Right, and I know that's the way it used to be. I trust me, I know that's the way it used to be, Jim. Yeah, but nowadays we need to we need to build up that encouragement and that even those skill levels. A lot of people don't even have the skills now. So I definitely understand the history of it, but I'm just want to base it off today and what we need to do projecting moving forward.
Ms. Veronica?
Yes, Gloria.
Can we go back for a second? I know you're talking about sponsorships and utilizing the monies from what is being the tax dollars, but I also wanted to contribute that it's a proven fact that children that are participating in after-school programs, parks and recs, is violence prevention within our city. Mm-hmm. It keeps the kids busy and out of the prison pipeline. So I agree with you 110% that this should be allocated, even if we could adjust the intervention funds to pay for those kids who have live with one parent or who can't make the means to participate, but that's going to keep them off the street, raising havoc in our city. So I agree.
Excellent, thank you. We don't even have to adjust the VIP fund. We still have funds that's allocated. They can be used for what our measure states that we're supposed to use the funds for. This is a perfect process of what the funds are supposed to be used for the intervention prevention. So it's just like Mike said, now we're just waiting for you. Is it Jim as our director of Parks and Rec?
Yes.
Or even, I was gonna say, we just need a number that we can be able to recommend so that all commissioners can be comfortable with that number recommendation for programming.
That's what I'm trying to come up with that right now, guys.
Oh, okay. Okay, and I guess then, we also need to know, as far as your coaches, your coaches as well, how many coaches are you need to be contracted out?
Again, the numbers of coaches is going to be dependent upon our registration. At any given time, if we have 6 teams as opposed to 4 teams, so it really is a revolving number. I mean, we could set a number and shoot for that. But to say we're going to need 9 coaches for a program that is really dependent upon our registration numbers
And your participation.
difficult. It's difficult to project that right now as we sit here.
Yeah, and we may want to have an income test or something for, the students that we actually
Yeah, I would like that.
free, and so it just depends what the number's like to me.
I agree.
If it's 100 people, that's one thing. If it's 10,000 people, it's a different one.
That's a different thing. Exactly. But I would definitely like to see hear the number in the budget, a projected budget that could cover that, so that the youth can participate without and there's other ways that they can participate to show their effort for our community sponsorship. That's the way, again, historically, kids always did things as well. So I guess, can you come back to us, or how would we do that?
And typically there was an income metric for that too, for the ones that we got scholarships for. I know for the school district and stuff, we did the same thing. There was a qualifier there.
Right.
Yeah. It's capable of doing that. They could write a paper or be helped to write a paper. There's many ways that we can do that in order to keep the kids engaged.
I think it's always good to have parents who value the program to actually pay for it out of their pocket, and but you don't want to have it prohibitive for someone who some poor kid who can't afford to do this to not allow them to participate. So.
Exactly. And especially, like I said, when we have this fund, and that's why we requested for the Measure S fund, is to be able to help those kids that might be challenged and those parents that might be challenged. But however, that's something that our Parks and Rec, we can develop a participatory type of process for the adults or something to be engaged, so that we make sure that we can have everybody working together.
Another thing we can do is allow other parents to sponsor some other kids and stuff too. So it'd really be nice if we could actually make this a community effort. And
exactly.
I think, yeah.
I don't want to hold up the meeting.
No, we
can compile these numbers, but I have 3 different programs. I'll have to put together the total numbers of those programs, and then I can chime back in if you guys want to continue on.
Yeah, it sounds like we got an open action to see if we can, if it's feasible to offer some type of a payment of those fees for families that can't afford it, and have some proof of income or whatever.
So one thing that you might want to consider is making a motion of a not to exceed number that we could establish and initiate a program like this, and make a recommendation to the council that they consider that, so that we provide for sponsorships up to a certain amount. So whether that's $10,000 set aside for that specific purpose based on need, and start building in part-time staff that provide staff support to the teams.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a starting point so that we can move forward, because Jim will need to do a little bit of analysis. We do need to make sure that we have the costing correct to get a full and complete picture of that. To do that on the fly is always a little bit difficult, and we want to make sure we have good numbers. So if you want to make a recommendation tonight that council consider that for a possible amendment and funding through using Measure S dollars, I think that's maybe a reasonable starting point.
I could probably use 10,000. That'd probably be a good, reasonable number.
We can start there. Yes.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. So do we want to call a motion for that specific
I call a motion.
action?
Yes. I call a motion to do that recommendation of 10,000 as a max in order to give to Parks and Rec programming on what we discussed as far as under our programming.
Yeah, scholarship and and I guess staff support.
and staff support.
And I'll second that.
Okay, I've been made a motion and you seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, excellent, good.
So Chairperson, do we want to take a motion? I assume that there's general support for the preliminary budget that had been proposed back on May 13th that we presented to you at the last meeting. You want to make a motion on that, and then we've got these additional items that you would like council to take into consideration that we will include when we bring it back with the budget adoption, and council will be continuing their discussion on their added items that they've not made decisions on yet. This will be included as part of that recommendation to them.
So the
We're going to take two different pieces. So we've done the motions on the additional items you want. I'm assuming based on that there haven't been any concerns raised with what had been proposed on May 13th that you're generally supportive of the budget as it was presented.
Yeah, and I guess the issue would be, or just a question, what part of that, and I guess maybe it's just the same percentage, would be from Measure S funds. Was it just kind of spread across the board that you'd have a piece of all of the stuff that Measure S funds would support? Is that kind of what I understood?
Didn't assign the Measure S funds to any particular program. We just did the amount that was the equivalent to Measure Z, the 1/4 of what we forecast. What we anticipated was that you would want to assign particular metrics, and you might want to link the Measure S funds to a particular program, which is absolutely something that you as the Measure S committee can do. You can say,
yeah, I would think that in order to report a metric, you probably only want to report a metric for the funds that you actually have some kind of an allocation for. So,
well, we actually intend to report metrics for every.
Well, that's wonderful.
But,
and that's great, you know, that you took our recommendation to do that. But we're Measure S folks, and if you want to take that recommendation all the way up through the entire budget, I'd sure make that motion. But but I don't think it'll, you know, there's no real teeth there. But yeah, since you guys are doing it anyway, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't. But just to even know whether, you know, adding people is an effective method for, you know, achieving some kind of an objective and an ultimate metric. I mean, as versus just we spent this many hours on this. That's an activity. It's not an accomplishment.
Right.
So,
and you know what? Just to go back, Mike, I think for our May 13th budget that we talked about, that was where we broke down the percentages, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So Mike does not see those percentages and those allocations.
yeah, I guess, and I don't know if we already did that then, is what I think I'm hearing.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying? Okay, so we already have those allocations.
Yeah, can you show Mike that, those?
Well, it's okay. I don't want to worry. If somebody could send that to me, that would be great.
Right.
We will. We'll make sure that you have a full accounting of the allocation. Of them.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Thank you.
Derek it needs that too, to see what recommended. And those were percentages that was allocated for public works, and it broke down the libraries and everything, Mike.
No, yeah, I did see the briefing and presentation. But as far as like, did we just distribute or make an assumption that all of Measure S funds would just be whatever the 0.25 or whatever percent that was, and allocated among every budget item? I mean, I don't think I'm hearing that.
No.
Okay, so my point is I think we as a committee would want to establish where our priorities and where we might think and recommend that Measure S funds would be targeted, and
exactly.
Then we would take the responsibility. We would take the responsibility to follow metrics for those particular items. We don't have the responsibility for the entire budget. I mean, that'd be fine. We'd probably be happy to look at it, but As far as our charter goes, I would think that would be something we would be interested in.
Yes. Go ahead, Rebecca.
We can do that. And I think with the policy that was adopted on expenditures, I think we've got a general accounting that you wanted those focused in
Yes.
Parks and Recreation programming. We had already, you were supporting the Violence Intervention Program, some public safety services that had already been pre-existing and supported through Measure Z, but we'll make sure that you have a full accounting. And if there's anything else specifically that you would like us to include, we can make sure that that's done.
And to me, it's just you'd want to add up all of the Measure S funds that are coming in and have an allocation for where we are, where we plan to make expenditures, and then that would be the charter of the committee, is to report outcomes on those
Those funds.
at the end of the year, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just kind of that simple. Yeah.
And we will be coming back. All the Measure S funds are being tracked separately, and there will be an audit, separate single audit for Measure S specifically, so that all that will be reported back to this committee. So you will be seeing that in its full accounting.
So we're already making expenditures on with Measure S funds, I would imagine. Are we? Because have we started making those expenditures?
We've only programmed what was already allocated and budgeted before Measure S was adopted. That was under Measure Z. So those dollars have been programmed already as part of the budget. So yes, that's there. It's the additional amount that's being generated now that started in April with the adoption of Measure S that we're talking about, that allocation now. And so that's what we're talking about through this budget process.
Right. And so, we've not quite done that yet, right? Made those allocations and things. That's what I think.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I got it. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Excellent. I think we got a better understanding. We did, but just for my clarity as well, Rebecca, we are already allocated a suggestion recommendation for the expenditures under Public Works and the libraries and different things in that May 13th budget. Was it that budget that?
So the May 13th, the bulk of what was recommended, or remember, was the capital improvement projects. We've got the 0.25% that we'd already been allocating, keeping existing funding levels that we had on operations that was supporting public safety, the violence intervention program, and we'll make sure that we have a full accounting of that for you. And if you would like us to make any further recommendations to make sure when we do that accounting and we bring it back to you, we can certainly do that. But we were maintaining all the existing programming that was funded under Measure Z, plus the additional things that were presented to you on to council on May 13th, and then followed up with you, I believe it was the 17th.
When do you think we'll have some idea on outcomes and projected outcomes so that we can start tracking and seeing how we're doing on those?
Well, once we start programming and spending the dollars, we should essentially on a quarterly basis have a tracking of outcomes in terms of how we're spending the money in different areas. Yeah.
I guess I'm okay, so we're. It seems backwards to me that usually you would project an outcome, and be it a reduction in crime rate, be it a reduction in something, an increase in X, or Y, and then you would be tracking along the lines to know how you're actually achieving those metrics. So since you haven't seen the metrics. And the outcomes that we haven't even projected what those outcomes are. As you're making expenditures, how can you actually know that those expenditures are being targeted towards those outcomes? I'm not sure I understand where you guys go.
Okay, so let me just jump in here for a second. I think, Mike, that what's going to happen, one of the issues here is we don't even know how much we're actually going to get out of Measure S yet. We need a year at least of revenues to even see how much money we're going to get. And it's going to be hard to take it specifically just in the context of of Measure S, we're going to have to be looking at it in the context of the overall budget.
No, that's great, and I think that I think you made that clear. I think that's the way to do it, because then you'll have those metrics or those outcome projections. I would think you'd want to have those pretty well in hand before you begin too much time and too much expenditure, to drive some of those outcomes. It's just targeting the efforts and dollars for your entire budget towards driving those outcomes. I'm not explaining anything that you guys don't know. You guys are the professionals, so.
And it's an iterative process. I mean, we're going to be learning. We have a lot to learn going forward on a lot of this stuff. Kind of a brave new world, because we've had how many years of fairly steady declines in budget.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a nice thing to actually be able to start tracking stuff and see what kind of beneficial impacts are coming out of our ability now to spend more, both on the staff side, the program side, and also on the CIP side. They're all going to play together to help make progress in a bunch of different ways. I mean, CIP expenditures actually have a beneficial impact socially. Economic development is an important component, and the CIP expenditures ultimately actually going to enhance the regional economy here. So there's a lot to it. Some of it's going to be hard to measure, but nonetheless, we will be, as Rebecca stated, we're going to be developing and sharing metrics as we go through this process.
Well, and how about this? You're absolutely right, Mr. Gallo. I'm sorry, I kind of misunderstood where you were going with this. We do and will be including the measurable outcomes for each one of our departments that'll be incorporated as part of our budget, which we will be tracking. I think we need to do a follow-up meeting after the council does the formal adoption of the budget. Any additional items that need to be considered, we need to come back to you with a report on that. I think that'll be a good time to
I'd love to. Love to understand, what the goals, objectives, and outcomes are for all your expenditures. And granted, we only have a responsibility to report on specific Measure S stuff, and that's going to be difficult. I get it. Because you don't even know how much it's going to be. But I think still establishing those outcomes and metrics up front is really good practice.
I would agree, and we can bring those back. We just need to, we'll talk about next steps with scheduling a follow-up meeting with you after the council meeting on the 16th, which we need to do. Barbara will probably be reaching out just to poll all the members for your availability so that we can lock in a date that will work. We need to report back to you on that, the specific details on exactly where the operational dollars are going, so that you have a very clear picture with the measurable outcomes that we're looking to track associated specifically with Measure S and on the broader whole. That's a very reasonable request.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca, and just so that I'm very clear, I want to make sure that what we already recommended to council as far as the expenditures, that's what that's still our recommended expenditure.
So the committee at the last meeting didn't make a formal recommendation. There were some comments that we did share with the council.
No, I'm talking about before you went into the workshop, before we went into council workshop, we had our commission submitted them a proposal with recommendations of percentages for public works and all of and libraries and suggestions. And so go ahead.
That was the Measure Z committee before you transitioned to Measure S. But yes, under the policy, kind of the priority areas, those were there. It was not presented as a percentage. The committee didn't end up approving the percentage allocation, but the priority allocation. So certainly you could go back to making sure that you want a certain percentages presented, but all of those were included in the policy. That
the last one, I would like to pull the last one that we recommended that even council enjoyed, that liked from our committee, the last proposal that we submitted. They enjoyed that proposal and they was pretty much in agreement with that. So I would like those to be pulled back for us to utilize that as a recommended still. I didn't change that. We didn't change that. This committee didn't change that.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely make sure that the policy that we go back to that when we bring back the update to you and make sure that that's incorporated.
Right, in the recommendation, just to keep that. I don't want, it's not erased or anything. That want to bring that recommendation still, I want it to still hold for this committee.
Okay.
Okay, so just as moving forward, what is it that we need to do in order to make sure that everything is straight and everything is recommended so that it could be formally presented? What, are we good? Because we didn't vote on all of the things.
You voted on the specific additional recommendations you'd like to have consider what you have not voted on, and it's up to you whether or not you want to make a formal recommendation if you're in concurrence with the broader spending that was presented to council in the proposed budget by staff on May 13th and presented to you on, I believe it was May 17th. If you want to make a formal recommendation. We shared your comments the last time. That's really up to the committee. We will share all the items that you've brought forward as a formal recommendation in terms of additional things you think need to be focused on. That will be communicated to the council on the 16th of June.
So your statement on broader spending, is that what you just brought to us again today, or what was that? What was that?
Did you want to make a recommendation on the budget that is being presented to council on the 16th for adoption, which was all of the CIP projects, all the things that have been presented to you on May 17th? Did you have any objection to those items? And assuming not, I would assume that you are supporting the budget as it was presented for Measure S spending, or no? Did you want to make a formal recommendation on the budget?
I guess my question would be the recommendation that we already made prior to. That's what I'm trying to understand. Does that make our committee's formal recommendation null and void?
No. Former actions of the committee are null and void. Those are all still in play. It was really just a specific question about the budget as presented, if you're supportive of what's going forward for adoption on the 16th of June.
Okay.
Did you have any objections to the items that had been included in the budget as a committee?
Yeah. Commission, do you have any objections?
I don't believe so. I don't.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I had a chance to read through everything.
I mean, the specific Measure S allocation. Yeah.
Okay. So we make a move to accept the presentation budget as has been brought forward to us. No objections. So all in favor? Say aye.
Yeah.
And any opposed? Okay.
Okay.
We've accepted that. Rebecca, is there anything else that we have to accept or move or motion?
No.
Okay. The only thing that I would ask, I guess, is we just dealing with our Parks and Rec programming. You'll come back with us with that. And then Gloria, you had a wonderful statement. I wanted to recognize you and propose that question to Jim. All right, or to whoever.
Oh, the proposal was, I know he said volunteer coaches and things of that nature, but part of this money is using community money to give back to community. So I was proposing to create a stipend or a scholarship for high school students who are exiting going to college to a scholarship fund for them to be a coach.
Mm-hmm. Okay, looking at different ways. That was nice. That is keep them also helping their community.
Yes.
Those are some suggestions, Jim. Suggestions.
I guess what I need is just clarify, when you say a scholarship program for them to become a coach, are you can you expand on that a little bit?
Some of the funding that
not
we're
quite
talking
clear.
about, the funding that we're talking about having coming in from Measure S. So when you go back and you look at what that budget looks like, or what that time span of hire, then that's what we're looking at to see if that can be done. But we just need something to work with. You go back.
I think we just came up with a $10,000 allocation.
Right, that was a $10,000. Exactly.
That would be for scholarships and for support staff, of which perhaps a stipend for college students to be able to become part of that support staff is included. So I think it's covered in that allocation. Right. I would think. And if we decide we want to do more, we can.
Right.
But I would think it wouldn't be prohibited in that 10,000 allocation that we had, and I think that's a good detail.
So yeah, and thank you, Mr. Gallo. Again, I think identifying it as a stipend program to help compensate the high school aides or college students, to help compensate them for what would technically be a volunteer. I think a stipend is a little bit more clear than
right.
Scholarship.
Well, you know what? Well, we can always talk about give it. We're reasoning with you right now. That doesn't have to be the terminology. We're just giving you the outcome of what we want to see. So you're going to come up with the wording and the titles. We're not giving you that. But we do want to see that involvement. That's basically what we as a committee are saying. So we can give different names and titles. You can give that. That's not for us to do.
All right.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Gloria, to add on that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Good. And I guess, Jim, just to say, so when you get a chance to look at your budget, even though Mike, we did to say 10,000 not to go over, and that's because he hasn't done a formal analysis on the amount of students that he's operating with.
Right. Yeah.
So
at least
I'm making that. We share with him not to go over 10,000 this time, but we still need to know a cost analysis.
Right. Yep.
Okay. So, Rebecca?
Yes.
Do we have anything else? I know we've been holding everybody. I know the staff is, chomping at the bit.
We are happy to be here. Appreciate everybody's time and your feedback. We'll make sure that's communicated.
So does that conclude where we are? We don't need anything else?
If we don't, Barbara will, or her team will follow up and pull you for a follow-up meeting. We know that needs to get scheduled fairly soon, within the next month or so. So we'll be looking for a date for that. But that concludes everything for today.
Great. I'll move to adjourn.
Okay, I will. Thank you again, Barbara, for your reporting out, and staff is here, just as Rebecca said. I always leave us with a quote. So this is the quote for tonight. Coming together is the beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. And that's by Henry Ford. And so with that, I say good night. Meeting adjourned.
Good night. Thank you.
All right.
You all.